Now, I couldn't get this exhaust manifold off because whenever the motor's in there and everything's together still, this bolt, hang on, let me get something to point at it. This bolt right here you can't get to without a swivel, and go figure, I don't have one, and I think even if you had a swivel you probably couldn't get to it because there's what looks like a catalytic converter, which might be, might not be, I don't know, is in the way. So therefore I had to leave this on, take one bolt out so it'll rotate a little bit, and take all the exhaust manifold bolts out, and just left it in there, which is a little tight. They say, from the videos I've seen, they say that this is really easy to get out once you got the bolts on top of here are real easy to get out once you have the intake manifold off, which is a lie in this case anyway. This bolt right here was a bitch. This bolt right here was definitely a bitch because, as you can see, there's a bracket right here, so it's kind of hard to get to the bolt. This bolt was alright. This bolt right here was a bitch, and this one was definitely a bitch. Couldn't even see this one, and you only had maybe about maybe an inch and a half of room to get your hand in there flat. Could only get my hand in there like this with a wrench and slowly turn it. But I bought a 2007 engine. It came out of a 2007 Ford Explorer Sport Trac, and the intake manifold's different, but from what I could tell, it's the same engine. Now, the only thing that I'm gonna have to change, as far as I know, is the intake manifold off this motor right here, and which this intake manifold looks like this, and it's just centered in the center of the motor. Now, the motor that I bought, the intake manifold on it comes off to the right. Like, picture the motor here and it's centered, the intake manifold. Well, this one, it's in the middle, obviously, because that's where it goes, but the manifold itself comes out this way. So what I'm going to do is, I've looked it up and it doesn't show shit online, and I guess I'll have to be the one to update it on YouTube to make sure it fits and everything, and if I run into any problems I'll let you know. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the motor, and I'm going to, while it's out of the vehicle after I get it, I'm going to put the intake manifold on there, my old one that's in the truck, and put it on there and compare motors and make sure everything's the same. If it's not, then I'm going to interchange them because they're the same motor. From what I've seen on YouTube, apparently the motors in these vehicles from this year, I don't know any other specific year, I think it's 2001, because 2000 they were still using some pushrod motors because they had spare pushrod motors left. So basically it's the same engine block as the older ones, the 99s, 98s, that were the pushrod engines. Well, instead of updating the whole engine, they use the same blocks blocked off the distributor hole with a plug, obviously, and they blocked off the pushrod holes. And instead of using a pushrod, they use single overhead cams. So that's as far as I know. I'm not very good with motors. I mean, I am, but I'm not. I'm young. I'm only 27. As far as I know, everything should be interchangeable on this motor. It's 3 years difference, so I mean, it could be a big difference. Might have to change a lot more than just that, but from what I understand and what I've seen, I should be able to change the manifold, intake manifold, and and that should be it as far as I know. Now, if anybody else knows anything, that'd be great. I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't find no videos of nothing to take this motor out. I mean, you can get videos and you can watch them, but they don't show how to take the starter off or anything like that. Now, whenever you go to take the starter off, the exhaust manifold has to come off. It has to. And the starter has to come off just to get to the flywheel bolts, the torque converter bolts. So, whenever you get up under there, under the truck, the exhaust is in the way, the front drive shaft is in the way, the pumpkin's in the way, the front rear end is what I call it, pumpkin. That's in the way, so you got just enough room to get the bolts out of the starter. So whenever you get the bolts out, the starter will come loose, but it won't come out of the bottom. There's just no room in this truck. They've got everything cram packed. Almost every bolt on that motor is a different size, it seems like. The torque converter bolts, they were like 932s, 932nds. They weren't even like, you know, a 14, 13, you know, like you'd think they would be, but they're all fucking standard. But anyway, to get the starter out, you take the starter bolts out from underneath the truck, you take the exhaust manifold bolts out from under the truck, and you take the exhaust manifolds out that's on the motor, and you pull that exhaust out, the manifold out. And then after that, you can get to the bolts to get the starter the rest of the way off. And I don't mean the bolts that are attached to the transmission. I mean the bolts that are holding down the wires, like these wires right here and this wire right here. Now, these bolts are starter bolts, in which you can get to under here whenever this is off the drive shaft. You can get to that, and then you got to take this off the manifold. Then once you get all that off, you can barely see the flywheel bolts, which is a pain in the ass. It just got on my nerves. This from what I've seen on YouTube, it looked like an easy job, and it is not easy. From what I was told from a couple buddies, it's going to be just as hard getting it in as it is getting out. I've looked online. It's an 8-hour job to get the motor out. It's an 8-hour job to get it in. Sometimes it takes longer to get it in, so, which don't make no sense because all the bolts are off. It'd be easier to put the bolts on and take them off, in my opinion. What I had the problem with this motor was the timing chain guides in the front driver's side, which are up here on closest to the radiator. The guides on it were shot, so I took it off, looked at it, they were shot. I was like, okay. I bought a whole timing kit. Was gonna put it on there, but I was like, well, before I put it on there, I need to check all the timing chains. I took the front water pump off, and then the timing chain housing, and that one, it had the guide on this side, which is right here, it was broke. I was like, okay, that's another fix, but that comes with the set. I was gonna put it on there too, but like I said, I was gonna check all the timing chains. I took this one off and was praying that it wasn't bad on this side, because if it's bad on this side, if it's bad on this side, it's all the way in the back. The timing chain is on all these vehicles, which makes no sense. So I took it off. Timing guide was good on this side of the motor, but on this side where it clips on to this little bolt was snapped, and right there tells you it has to be replaced. So I knew the motor had to come out, but at the same time, as I checked the intake valves after the intake was off, and they look good. They look seated and everything. And this is supposed to be an interference motor. Now, I've seen both sides to where it could be interference and it's not interference, blah blah blah. Well, as far as I know, it is. And if it is interference and they both cams jump time, then more than likely you're going to get a bent valve. So I want to know if it's a bent valve, if there's bent valves in this motor right here, or if it's a salvageable motor. I mean, it leaks oil everywhere. I already got another motor, but I want a spare motor just in case, because these specific motors are really bad, super bad, about timing chain guide failures. So I just had those few questions. There was really no videos to take this fucking motor out. There was, but they weren't specific. You know, they didn't tell you that it was going to be hard to get the flywheel bolts out, the torque converter bolts. They didn't tell you about these bolts right here, that you couldn't get to them unless you took that off. And it was just a pain in the ass. So I would like to know what your guys' opinions are and what you think could be salvageable on this motor, or if it is a salvageable motor. I know the valves are relatively cheap on eBay, but at the same time they could be just cheaply made valves, and I don't want to drop a valve while going down the road if that's the case. So thanks. If you like the video, you can subscribe. If not, I mean, I don't really care. I don't really record videos. It's my first one, so just let me know what you think. Yes, this is not a tear apart video. My first time ever recording anything. But if this one gets good reviews and gets enough people to like it, then or not like it, but get enough views, then I'll record putting it back together for the most part. Thanks.